introduction, and then we'll get down to it, okay? So it's Dave's fault. The reason we're doing TADSummit Special is because Dave couldn't present in November, so we decided, okay, we're going to have a special event, and fortunately we were able to get Eric yesterday and Ale and Sandro on Tuesday. So we're wrapping up the special with Dave. Dave's going to be talking about why conversational AI providers are moving to open source. So Dave, really pleased to have you here, and over to you.
All right, thanks, Alan. Let me make sure I can bring up my slides here. It's only been since yesterday that we went through this, but I will endeavor to find the share button. Where is it?
Down the bottom there, you'll see it's a little
yeah,
arrow in a screen.
Now I'm trying to share my slides.
There you go. I see them. Yep.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, first of all, thank you, Alan, and hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dave Horton. I feel like a little bit like a kid in high school taking a makeup test. As Alan said, I was supposed to give this talk as part of TADSummit in the fall. I just got too busy at the time. So I appreciate Alan giving me a second chance, and hopefully I won't flunk this time. I'm going to talk about open source, which is what I do and love, and building voice bots for conversational AI platforms using open source. But before I get into that, just a quick bit about me. I manage 2 open source projects, Stractio, which is a programmable SIP application server that really tries to bring some of the easy use of modern programming paradigms to our dusty old world of VoIP, voice over IP. And secondly, jambonz, which is a bring your own everything, as I call it, CPaaS. By that I mean bring your own carriers, bring your own speech, et cetera, et cetera. It's built on some of the leading open source products that include Stractio, RTP Engine, and FreeSwitch. And the source code for both of my projects is available on GitHub and MIT licensed. It's pretty easy to try out jambonz, either by going to jambonz.xyz and create a free trial account on our hosted system, or you can spin up your own AWS server using the AWS Marketplace offering it. You can find information about both options on our website at jambonz.org. My career's been a little bit different. In the first part, I built a commercial software company in the telecoms space. And in the second part, I built a business focusing entirely on open source, and primarily these open source projects also in the telecom space. But the point is that I've worked on both sides of things, and that kind of brings me to the purpose of today's talk. Oh yeah, a little bit more about me. I love rugby, Wales, which is where I initially, on a sabbatical, started these projects, traveling and trekking around the world. So my focus is on building voice gateways or voice channels, or focus on this talk anyways, the voice gateways in the conversational AI space. So my purpose is twofold, hope to accomplish 2 things. First, I want to make the case that over the next 2 to 5 years, fairly short time period, that open source platforms will become the predominant solution for these voice gateways. And then secondly, I want to and hope to maybe further convince you of that by demonstrating some of the innovations that open source and only open source can enable. So I'm going to talk to a few slides. I think I have 7 or 8 slides, hopefully not too long, and then we'll do some demos. And then if there's questions, I'll take questions. All right. So let's first define the conversational AI space, and which is pretty easy because Gartner does that for us. Gartner Group does an annual roundup of a selection of companies in this space. And I say a selection of companies because, they don't survey all the companies. They sort of pick the leading companies. There's probably 4 or 5x the number shown here that also compete in the space, if not more. But pictured here on this slide is their so-called Magic Quadrant, where they've tried to place companies according to 2 dimensions of completeness of vision on the one hand and ability to execute on the other. And of course, as any good MBA student would tell you, you always want to appear in the upper right area of these quadrants, which they've designated the Leaders Quadrant. And I have to say, I'm proud to say that several jambonz customers are in the Leaders Quadrant. And so my talk is really focused on how companies like these who want to enable a voice channel to their AI-driven services can do it. And those companies, you could also sort them by a different dimension. And that would be how innovative do they want to be with their voice offerings? Because you could certainly build a very basic voice channel on top of a chatbot for instance, just by fronting it with some simple text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and call it a day. And for companies not really focusing on voice, that's not really their differentiator, that might be good enough. But voice is still one of the most expressive mediums we have. It offers the most potential, therefore, for delighting customers. And you know what? Voice conversations in contact centers still kind of suck. There's a lot of room for improvement, is all I'm saying, which means a lot of room for innovation. And those companies for whom it's more of a strategic imperative to be an innovation leader in voice, they have to think hard about how to do that, how to find a voice platform that they can drive their innovations, their IP, their intellectual property into that platform. Now, does that sound like a job for open source? I think so. Let's see if I can get to the next slide here. There we are. So here's a really crappy slide. Did I mention this is a makeup test? This is the kind of answer you get from the kid that's taken the makeup test, who slept through it the first time around. This is literally one step above the dog ate my slide. But I'm really just trying to do something very simple here and illustrate that conversational AI companies looking to build a voice gateway have three choices. And I haven't really put numbers to them because I don't have hard data. I only have information from talking to various people in the industry. But basically, there's three ways you can do it. You can license a commercial product. For example, the AudioCodes Voice AI Connect is probably one of the leading commercial products, and there are, of course, several others. They can use what I'm describing as a community-driven free open source platform. This is what jambonz is. And there's others in this space as well, including, for instance, Phonister and some others. Or they can hand-roll their own custom kind of one-off platform using open source components and then resulting in a closed source bespoke kind of product. So all of these are strategies, and they're all being used today. I gave, I don't really have data, but I gave a larger chunk to the commercial solutions because I'm thinking, my sense is that's probably they're starting out with a good share of the market. But I'm looking forward, and let's see where things go from here. Let's see if we community-driven FOSS projects can make things a little spicy. Sometimes I feel like we in the open source community feel like we're continually in a David versus Goliath kind of battle. The odds are stacked against us. We generally have less funding than our commercial counterparts. We struggle to find business models that work. We deal with demands that are sometimes unreasonable from people that want to extract value from the projects without giving anything back. And sometimes it seems to me it kind of puts us on the back foot mentally, so to speak, when it comes to competing with commercial products. But I would suggest we turn this around and flip the question. So instead of asking, can community-driven FOSS win in the conversational space? I think it's actually a lot more interesting to say, can commercial voice platforms survive in the conversational AI space? And I want to look back at history just a little bit. And over the last 15, 20 years, I'm old enough to have completed that entire term in the telecom space, and maybe some of you are as well. Open source, of course, has really reshaped the competitive landscape. So let's start with the big one, Linux. I can remember 15, 20 years back when my customers were saying, yeah, there's this cool new OS, but it's not ready for prime time. You know what? I'm going to run it on my backup DNS server. I must have had 5 customers tell me, yeah, put it on my backup DNS server in the back of my data center. Because of course they had Solaris, which came from an actual company with an actual building and actual paid employees. And of course it was going to be much better. It was Solaris, for Christ's sake. And we all know how that ended. Similar things were happening in telecom during that space. During that time, I was selling large conferencing systems to telco. And that went from a great business where the price was $1,000 a port down to $500, down to $100, down to $50 a port by the end. It wasn't just open source that was changing. In the voice arena that we've been in that period of time, one barrier to entry after another came tumbling down. And commercial companies need barriers to entry. They need to have some sort of moat around their competitive position in order to be sustainable and to have an investment theme. And those moats have just dried up one by one over these past so many years. So let's look at them. Those of us who were around during the early days might recall companies had a lot more patent protection in the early 2000s. And in fact, there was a lot of really broad patents at that time. I bet some of you can remember the so-called IVR patents that were ridiculously broad and entangled a lot of companies. That's really been tightened up, and that's largely gone away, at least in the mainstream telecom voice area that we all work in. We're all doing what we're doing with largely the same fundamental technology building blocks with no real worry of patent infringement anymore. So that barrier to entry is gone. The advantage of scale is another moat. A company can have an advantage of scale. I see I've got some stuff clicking in the background, so let me get rid of that. There we go. A company can have an advantage of scale when the resources required for a challenge are just too much to put together. So in the old days, to build and support a telco product, first of all, you had to go out and purchase a large amount of hardware, and it was expensive. And now we just, of course, rent service in the cloud for a fraction of the cost. And also building a product in those days meant building everything from the ground up, millions of lines of code. And that was another advantage of scale. But really now, when we're using open source, standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, we're really more assembling software than writing it. What took 1 million lines of code now, or in the old days, might be 10,000 lines of code. So that barrier to entry is largely gone. It also used to be that telco companies were really hardware focused, and you had to acquire expensive special purpose hardware to run their stuff. And a lot of those businesses are gone and we're running on cheap, powerful commodity hardware, usually virtualized to be even cheaper. In the old days, if you bought a voice system or, say, speech recognition system from a vendor, you got a highly bundled system of hardware and software. It was expensive, it was complex, and as a result, it locked you in. Now, if I want speech recognition, I put down a credit card and buy it on as a cloud service for peanuts. So that barrier to entry is gone. Now, the final moat that used to exist that's dried up has to do with the fact that voice and telcos used to be an old boys club, where now we'd like to say we've democratized telecom. In the past, it was very hard to get access to all the complementary services that you needed to put together to run a service, unless you were a big player or a telco yourself. To get a SIP trunk, you needed to be some sort of high priest of telco, know a special handshake, and be willing to shell out a lot of money. And now, once again, we're clicking to provision and tear down SIP trunks in the cloud as needed. And so the barrier to entry of privileged access, like all the others, that's largely gone as well. So how does it look now? Well, we can compare the commercial voice platforms and voice FOSS communities, community-driven FOSS, and see that each has advantages and disadvantages. So commercial platforms they largely today have the advantage of convenience. They can do a lot of ancillary services that some FOSS platforms don't yet do. And they probably have a perceived quality advantage as well, though much in the same way my old customer wasn't ready to mothball his Solaris servers when Linux first came out. On the other hand, they've got disadvantages, as we've just shown. They have no barriers to entry, really. A higher cost structure. And also, importantly, maybe most importantly, due to the nature of closed source product, there's really limited ability for customers to drive their own innovations into the product. If you want an appliance that you're never going to change, that's fine. If you want something that you need to drive innovation into, that's in a sense permeable to that innovation, that's not fine. On the other hand, community-driven FOSS platforms have the advantage of lower cost, greater flexibility in terms of deployment, but probably most importantly, a great ability for the customer to drive their innovations into the product. And on the FOSS has disadvantages as well. Right now, it's less mature and lacking some convenience. But the main difference in the two situations is that the disadvantages of FOSS are temporary, where those on the commercial side are basically irreparable. So add it all up, and that's why, in big picture, I say we will see community-driven FOSS platforms sort of dominate in this space. That's basically all the talking I wanted to do, and I wanted to do some demos now. I'm really excited to show you some of the ways that Cognigy, who is one of the leaders in that Gartner report, 2 years running, so they're in that Magic Quadrant of the Magic Quadrant report, the upper right, has utilized jambonz to create Voice Gateway and create some really innovative voice features. So to do that, I need to switch my sharing to a different window. Now, yes, I'll share this window now. Okay, hopefully you can see where I'm at in a flowchart editor, and this is actually Cognigy's low-code editor. Okay, good. So all of the conversational AI companies, or most of them, have a sort of low-code, no-code editing environment. They're all pretty nice. In my past, I've built some of these before. I have to say Cognigy's is one of the nicest, really easy to use. I've built a very basic flow here that we'll use for testing, so it's by no means anything ready for production. But my goal is to illustrate some of the voice features, as well as some of the neat Cognigy features, because I'm always really proud of my customers and what they've done. So this is a very simple template of a flight status checker. You can see the first time through, we hit this once block. So on the first time, we're going to play a welcome message, ask what they want to do. We're going to take that utterance that gets collected and feed it through NLU and look up an intent. And we've defined a couple of intents. The main one being a flight status. The person wants to check their flight status. And if they want to check their flight status, we'll ask them some questions. The date of the flight, the flight number. At this point, we typically hit an API to go off and check the flight status. And Cognigy has a lot of different APIs that we could add. I've just sort of hard-coded a response here for now. I'm just going to say that the flight is delayed by an hour. And we're going to offer to send a text with some more information. They can say yes or no. If they say yes, we could go off and send the text via any number of the plugins that Cognigy has, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to say, yes, you'll receive the text. Ask if there's anything else I can do. So a pretty basic call flow, but it'll let me illustrate some voice features. Before we do that, we can just briefly look at some of the NLUs. So we can create intents, and we've got an intent called a flight status. This isn't, and we've got some example sentences that will be fed into the NLU. This isn't really apropos of voice, but one of the neat things that Cognigy has done recently is integrate support for ChatGPT in the areas where it really makes sense. And one is generating sentences like this to build a model. So I can put my ChatGPT API key into my account here, and it will go off and based on the sentences I've already created, it can create some more sentences that will fit into the model, and I can rebuild the model. So it's a really nice use of ChatGPT that takes the good things that it can do, while we're still all grappling with the areas like hallucination that we need to sort of guard against. So I can rebuild the model. We can go back to the chart. Okay, there's a couple ways to test a basic flow like this. We can first, let's just test it in the chat. Reset the session so I can just come in and chat and test my flow. We've always obviously been able to do this. Welcome to Jambonz Airlines. How can I help you today? I'm going to check my flight status. We'll get to the voice part in a sec, but I just want to give you a basic sense of how things work here. And you notice that as I'm doing this, it's sort of navigating the flow editor is moving around. So I'm kind of almost like step-by-step debugging. I'm getting a chance to see where in the flow I am. Here we have a simple flow. We could have a lot of nested flows calling each other. And so being able to trace through it as you go is a really nice thing. Let's see, the flight number is 205. Pick a date. Let's see, today. Again, we're just hard coding a message. Shall I send you? We'll say yes. Do that. Is there anything else we have with? No. Okay. So we got a basic flow that we can test in an editor like this. Now, the first thing that Cognigy's done on the voice side is enable us to test it right now in voice. So we'll do that in a second. It's a WebRTC call. But there's a couple things that I want to point out. First of all, the following feature where you can see the flow executing as you go, that'll be available in voice as well, even though the voice platform is obviously completely separate. They're now, because jambonz is open source, able to be very tightly integrated. And the other thing is this is not a simulated environment. We're not sort of testing this in a simulated environment. This is actually on the fly, provisioning something into a production environment, executing it in exactly the same way your customers will. So in all regards, it's a really accurate test. And for those of us in the voice world who are used to upgrades happening in maintenance hours and rolling things in, rolling things back to get production changes in, this is really pretty astounding that we can do this just in time, basically, as it were. So hopefully you'll hear the voice. I think you're going to hear the voice if Jitsy's all working correctly. Let's go ahead and make a call.
Yep, we can
And
hear
welcome, Airlines. How can I help you today?
I'd like to check my flight status.
Let me look that up for you. Please provide me with your flight number.
2032.
Please provide the date that the flight is scheduled to arrive.
Today.
Not sure I understood this correctly. Please provide the date that the flight is scheduled to arrive.
Today.
Thank you. So I am sorry to inform you that your flight is delayed by 1 hour. Shall I send you more information on your connecting flights via SMS?
Sure.
All right. You will soon receive an SMS with more information. Is there anything else I can help you with?
No, thanks.
Thanks, and have a nice day.
Okay, a couple of things that we noticed. One is that it didn't catch one of my inputs, and I think that's because I didn't allow barge in. So we can do things like allow people to barge in to the voice. I'll show that in a second. It didn't really pronounce jambonz too well, so I'd like to fix that. If I go back here, I can see the transcripts and I can see all of the detail. I can see the confidence levels as well. So here it had a confidence level of 92%. I'd like to check my flight status. If I go back here, this is the one that didn't sound so good. I can do a voice preview to kind of listen to how it sounds. I'm choosing to use Microsoft for text-to-speech and TTS. There's a lot of other vendors that jambonz supports as well.
Hi, and welcome to jambonz Airlines. How can I help you today?
So that's not great, but we can fix that. We use an SSML, so we'll just put a sub tag in. Alias equals jambonz. I'm always forgetting how to do this. Let's see if that sounds better.
Hi, and welcome to jambonz Airlines. How can I help you today?
Okay, that's much better. So let's actually implement that. If I go in here, so you can build a flow like this that'll work in voice, it'll work in chat, it'll work in WhatsApp, it'll work in sort of anything. As kind of a lowest common denominator, but you can add, if you want to tune something, you can add it for different channels. So I can add some tuning for voice, along with, of course, any of these other channels that we see here. So if I go to voice, oops, I did not get what I wanted there. Let me go back to here. I'll take this. Oh gosh, sorry, I did it. Let's continue. I did it on the whole wrong note. This is the one I want to do. Voice gateway, right. We'll take this and we'll make it into SMS. Just like I did before. Sometimes we have a little clipping on VoIP networks, so maybe we can put a pause at the beginning if we want. And we can save that note. Okay. The other thing was it didn't hang up at the end. Thanks and have a nice day. And I had to click to hang up. So let's have the bot hang up on us. And we can just do the hang up there. Now, the part where it didn't collect was probably the question node. There are things we can do here to allow barge in, because it's basically waiting until it finishes this before collecting, but I'm just going to leave that for now. But we could enable barge in if we want to. Okay, so now I've made those changes. I should be able to test them, I think, without doing anything further. I'm going to build the model anyways, but let's see if we.
Hi and welcome to Jambonz Airlines. How can I help you today?
I'd like to check my flight status.
Let me look that up for you. Please provide me with your flight number.
20144.
Please provide the date that the flight is scheduled to arrive.
Today.
Thank you. So I am sorry to inform you that your flight is delayed by 1 hour. Shall I send you more information on your connecting flights via SMS?
No thanks.
Is there anything else I can help you with?
Nope.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to do that. Can you ask me something else?
No thanks.
Thanks, and have a nice day.
Everything sounded right. It didn't hit the thank you intent. I probably didn't put nope as a possible route there, so we could tune that intent to do it. But the key thing is that I'm able to tune this flow for voice. I'm able to test it in an editor exactly using WebRTC, exactly as the customer will do, and able to kind of almost step through it node by node as the voice call is proceeding. So now I want to sort of switch and look at things on the jambonz side a little bit more. We take this flow and now we can deploy it into production in the sense of connecting a phone number to it. To do that in Cognigy, we go to deploy an endpoint. We have a voice channel endpoint, and it has a WebSocket URL. So on the jambonz side, jambonz, as I mentioned, is what we often call a CPaaS, programmable communications platform. And it can talk to applications either via WebSockets or webhooks. In the case of integrating, either's fine, but in the case of integrating conversational AI, WebSockets are probably preferred because you can be a lot more asynchronous. So we can take this WebSocket URL and we can configure a jambonz system to point to it to get its instructions. So let's log in. I'm just going to test it from a jambonz server of my own that I've got running on AWS. So I'm logging into a jambonz system. We'll take a quick look around here. First of all, it is as I said, bring your own everything. So you bring your own carriers, and I've created 3 carriers. I'm using a Twilio Elastic trunk, so I'm setting that up. Creating a carrier is pretty straightforward. You can always, of course, think of this as a SIP trunk. Basically, you create a carrier, and the main thing is you're going to do is add the carrier's gateways, IP addresses or DNS names. And they're either inbound or outbound. So just like we always whitelist IPs to receive or place calls, you put in one or more SIP gateways for the carrier. That's definitely required. Other things you can do if the carrier requires E64, you specify that. If the carrier requires outbound authentication, so a lot of times if we're sending an outbound call, we might need to SIP digest authentication. Sometimes we even need to send a SIP register in advance to register against a SIP, one of our SIP trunks, so we can do that as well. So a lot of options there. We can add a tech prefix if the carrier requires a tech prefix. We can add, if the carrier supports a diversion header for the from, we can do that. So a whole bunch of options there, but setting up a carrier is pretty easy. And in fact, we have a bunch predefined. So if I, was to say Simwood, it would go ahead and create a carrier for Simwood, pump in all their IP addresses, and I'm sort of good to go. So you bring your own
screen from the assistant, not the jambonz screen.
I'm not hearing the question too well. I don't know, Alan, if you were and you can relay it or something.
Yeah, you're showing the previous image. You're not showing jambonz.
Oh gosh, I'm so. Of course, thank you. Hold on one sec. Let's see. Let's go back. Go here. View tab. Let's see. So stop sharing and then start sharing. Okay. Yeah, so sorry. Anyways, so now you can see, hopefully, that I'm logged into jambonz. And as I said, it's kind of a bring your own carrier thing. What I had said was briefly that you come in here and you can specify the IP addresses of the carrier or the SIP trunking provider. And you can add things like outbound authentication if that's required. You can register with carrier if that's required. If you can specify a tech prefix if that's required, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you kind of tell your carrier to go and whitelist this IP so they can send things. And we support SMPP for SMS as well. So anyways, you bring your own carriers. Creating them is fairly straightforward and easy. Bring your own speech providers as well. So you can add a speech service. We've got a pretty good selection of vendors here for speech: AWS, Google, DeepGram, IBM, Microsoft, Nuance, NVIDIA, well said, and custom if you want. You can build to an API and add a speech provider that we don't even support yet. So I've added Google, I've added DeepGram, I've added Microsoft, I added Assembly AI, which I used the custom one to do NVIDIA. So you can add any number of speech providers. It's a multi-tenant system, so we have accounts, and accounts fall under a tenant of the service. In this case, there's just one tenant called default service provider. So in jambonz, a service provider is a tenant, and we can create new tenants, new slices of the system if we want to. And then under service provider, we can create more accounts if we want to. And finally, we can create users, and we can associate them at various levels. So a user can be an admin user, as I'm logged in, or they can be a service provider level user. They would see only that slice of the database, or even below that, an account level user, they see only one account and that. So it's meant to be a multi-tenant solution that can be rebranded and then exposed to customers. But getting back to the connecting the phone number to our app so we can test it, that's an application. So we create an application, and then jambonz will create a flight status. Let's call it flight status. There. Account. And we would go back and take that, see if it's still in my, yeah, we would take that endpoint, which we saw when we deployed our flow from Cognigy, and we just tell jambonz, this is where we're going to go for that. We can send call status events somewhere else, but typically we just send them to the same endpoint. And then we can set up our speech synthesis and speech recognition. So I'll use WaveNet C. And for fun, I'll switch to DeepGram for recognition. So now we've got an application called Flight Status Checker. I can have phone numbers associated with any of my SIP trunks or carriers. I've got one from Twilio trunk, so I'm just going to use that. And I will route it to our flight status application. And so now I'm able to call that number, and I'll also reach our flow. Now, one of the things that's kind of cool here that Cognigy's done, I'll go back to that flow. So here's our flow again, which we previously tested through voice. Go ahead and reset that session. They have something called live follow. If I'm going to make a call through a completely
Dave, you need to switch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, share this.
It's easy to do. There you go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Sorry. So anyways, we're back in the flow editor, and I'm going to be testing now calling in on a Twilio. Oops, Twilio DID. I don't know why that's that. Let me just try to reset the session there. So Cognigy have a pretty neat thing called live follow. I type in my calling number, 1-508-308-4809. So now when I make the call, we'll track that number, even though I'm not generating the call through the what they call the interaction panel. So let me make the call on my cell phone. I'll try to put it on speaker. I guess maybe that's not going to come through. Who knows? Maybe you may just hear one side of the conversation. But anyways, let's give it a try.
Hi and welcome to jambonz Airlines. How can I help you today?
I'd like to check my flight status. Oh, wait a sec. I forgot to start this thing, I think. Let me go again. Here we are. So now we're flying. So.
Hi and welcome to jambonz Airlines. How can I help you today?
I'd like to check my flight status.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to do that. Can you?
I think talking into the speaker has been a problem. Let me try without the speaker. 1 second. Oops. Stop that. Reset. I'd like to check my flight status. $2004. It's today. No, thank you. No. Sorry, my thank you intent is obviously not very good. But let me get back. So that's kind of a really neat feature where I'm making a call through a different system. Could be a production system. It wasn't in this case. And yet I can still track it in this development environment. And I can see things like the transcripts, the confidence levels. The other thing I wanted to point out is when you get a call, you get all of the detail of the incoming SIP call. So it's quite frequent that you would need to look at custom headers that might be applied, really any custom headers. And so all of that's available to your flow. You can easily pick it out if you need to. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to show you on the Cognigy side. I want to switch back and just round out kind of the aspects of jambonz that we haven't had a look at. We had a little bit of a look at the web portal, so we saw that we've got this multi-tenant user, we've got accounts and application kind of hierarchy. We can look at recent calls. So here's a call, for instance, that I just made. We get the data on that, and we can download PCAPs.
We're still seeing the
Cognigy. Oh, yeah. Share the stuff. Sorry. So yeah, I was saying, where we got. We can look at recent calls, and we can download PCAPs and look at the PCAPs for the call, which is always nice. We can look at alerts if there are. There were some alerts earlier today from some testing of Assembly AI. And so forth. We covered pretty much everything else. The other aspect is, in order to run a voice system, you need to have all the tools to manage it. So jambonz comes with a Grafana dashboard. We can look at metrics. So if you're managing a system like this, you can see the number of calls on this. Here we're just looking at the last 5 minutes. So we just happen to see my last couple of calls. So there's only one call on the system. We can look at the total media streams, total inbound or outbound calls. We can pie chart of response codes. We can look at how the system's responding. So database lookup times, 5 milliseconds. That's great. Commands we're sending to RTP engine, 2 milliseconds. That's looked good. TTS response time. Here it took 216 milliseconds to get TTS back from Google. We cache them. So after we retrieve something once, it's in cache for up to a day. So here we're seeing how effective the caching is, how many cache hits are. Free switches in the background as well, so we can track the number of channels, things that are going on. And, then all basic, low-level stuff, load average, so forth, things like that. So kind of an at-a-glance heads-up dashboard for NOC people to be able to manage a jambonz system. If we go back, and I'm going to remember this time to click back to this thing, and in all this data that we have, there's a couple of useful pieces of information. There's a call identifier, a call SID, and we can use that for various purposes. There is also a trace ID. This is an open telemetry trace ID. So out of the box, jambonz comes with Jaeger installed as well, and open telemetry, and I can put in a trace ID. And now I can see, real low-level detail, application tracing for a call. So I can see we had an incoming call. We did a lookup account details in the database. It took 2 milliseconds. We looked up an application. That's another database lookup that took 2 milliseconds. We then made that WebSocket connection and got some initial set of instructions. That took 500 milliseconds. When we're playing something, we can see that TTS generation took only 7 milliseconds, and that's probably because we grabbed it out of cache. There's sometimes more detail down here. We can see that we did get it out of cache. We can see the language and so forth. So, application tracing and observability is a big part of managing systems. And so that's a nice feature as jambonz as well. We can see pretty much the entire path that this call took through the customer's application. We can easily troubleshoot. If he says he was experiencing a delay, we'll be able to see, well, was it database? Was it TDS generation? Sort of what was it? Beyond that, there's even more detailed logs that get shipped to CloudWatch for this system. So we can go, oh yeah, here we go again. I need to switch to CloudWatch. And if we want to, we can look at, really detailed low-level application logs. Let's just look for the last minute, 30 minutes, I guess. Oops, there we go. And just expand all roles. So if we really want to see a lot of detail, we can see all of the application logging in CloudWatch. So those features, I think, are often overlooked, but really important for a voice platform. Not just that it works, but that it can be managed. It has all the observability features you need. It can be monitored and so forth. So the one last thing I want to do in terms of speaking of jambonz, and let's share this tab again. When we created an application, created our flight status checker, again, jambonz supports either WebSockets or webhooks. So you can build an application that responds to webhooks and returns sort of a payload of instructions. Or you can build an application using WebSockets. You're similarly returning payloads of instructions. You just have a little more asynchrony. People are sometimes intimidated or just wondering, well, how hard it is to build an application like that. Like if I have a conversational AI platform and I want to sort of quickly scaffold something up and have jambonz be a voice gateway, how hard is that going to be? The answer is not too hard, because I'll show you in hopefully 2 or 3 minutes how to do that. And to do that, I got to switch tabs again. So let me go back here and try to see if I go to a terminal window and we can just all geek out and do a little code. I think it's this one. Yeah, I think you're seeing a pretty empty terminal window here right now.
Yep.
So jambonz has a nice NBX create app. So NBX create jambonz. We can either do jambonz app for WebSockets or create jambonz WS app for a WebSocket. I think that's it. Let's try it out here. Yes. So we run it with no arguments, and we can see we've got a few different things. We can scaffold up an app. We can scaffold a simple hello world. We can scaffold an echo kind of bot. We can scaffold a chat GP3 voice bot. We can do an app that has all of them. So let's just do something simple. Let's just do echo. Call it my echo. Because I just want to give you a quick sense of the bones of a application that will talk to jambonz over WebSockets. Okay, so there we are. So let's go into my echo. Let's look at the code briefly. And I think I need to go and share, or maybe I was sharing that. I was sharing a window, so that probably should have done it, I suppose. Yeah, okay, my bad. So you can see VS Code at the moment, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the application that just got pumped out for us. It's got a main file, which is basically not a lot and just some boilerplate code. It's going to listen. It's going to create a WebSocket server. It's going to listen by default on port 3000 unless you tell it otherwise. And then we have various handlers down here. And in this case, we're doing echo. So the basic template looks like this. We're going to create when we have a WebSocket connection, it's a new session. We've got an event and we get a lot of data. We get, for instance, that call identifier that I talked to you about before, call SID. And this session object has set of methods that all correspond to the jambonz verbs, which you can find on the jambonz website. So here we're going to pause for a second and a half, and then we're going to do a gather, jambonz gather command, where we're going to say, please. Input is going to be speech, could be speech or DTMF. We're going to use the default recognizer. We could, if we wanted to override, we could easily just say recognizer and then put something different down here, such as vendor nuance or something. I'm just going to use the default, which is going to be whatever I create for this application. And when we get results, I'm going to ask for interim transcripts. So as I'm speaking, we'll get transcripts. But I will also get a final transcript to /echo. And on /echo, I'm just going to handle it in this handler down here. If I've detected speech, then I'm going to call this method, and I just do another say. So I'm going to say, you said this, and the confidence score was that, and then I'm going to prompt again. So it's not a lot of lines of code, 76 lines of code for, a very basic kind of app. Let's go back here and just start it up. That's all fine. It's listening on port 3000. I need to use ngrok since we're on my laptop here. And so I'm going to start ngrok session, also listening on port 3000. Give me a DNS name that I can use to get to it.
You're still on the code page from before, just in case you're showing anything.
Oh, yes. Okay, let's go back to the code page and say something like stop sharing. And then let's say back to this one. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So now you see, so I've got ngrok. I just basically, in this window, I just started the application. I haven't made any changes. This window, I've got ngrok, which has given me a URL I can use. So now we will once again switch back to here, because I need to create a new application for my new little app. Let's just call it Echo Tester. Let's call it Echo. And the webhook is going to be that URL that I have /echo, except it is a WebSocket. So let's not forget that and just make it a WebSocket. And we'll send the call status to the same place. We'll do speech synthesis that way. Speech recognition for fun, let's use deepgram. Deepgram is nice and snappy. Once again, I'm going to have to call through my phone number, so you will probably only hear one side of the conversation, unfortunately, but so we'll change from flight status to echo. All right, and switch back now to, sorry about all the switching. So we'll switch back to this guy. We can just see some of the logging that comes out of here. All right, here I go, call in. What time is the meeting tomorrow? I'll be 1 hour late for the meeting. Okay, so yeah, I didn't think ahead of time that you would only be able to hear one side of the conversation, but basically it works. It's a simple echo app, but what we've done is build, scaffolded up a very basic skeleton for talking to jambonz from something like a conversational AI platform, and is really, as you can see, it's not that hard. It just takes like 5 minutes to do. That's it. That's let me stop sharing again. Okay. Yeah, so that's what I had prepared to show you guys. And I don't know if anyone has questions, but if so, happy to try to answer them.
That was excellent, Dave. When did you add in all the observability stuff? Has that been there for a while now?
Over the last year, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was impressive. And I have to admit, the start of the presentation where you basically were explaining that the answer is community-driven FOSS, forget about commercial, was really cool.
I don't want to be too bombastic about it, but I do think it's a chat. We're always thinking, oh, our road to hoe is pretty hard, but I actually think the commercial side is pretty hard to road to hoe too.
Cool. And this was a great example of just using jambonz within Cognigy's sort of a framework. I was just wondering, because that's one of the core differentiators in using community-driven FOSS is users of it can drive innovation into the product. So you've shown some great. I mean, it's powerful. I mean, it really is a true definition of programmable communications. You're just able to configure everything through software, just basically simple drop downs. What are some other examples that you think are interesting in terms of driving innovation into products through using jambonz?
Well, I mean, I would say another thing that Cognigy has done that sort of required driving things into jambonz, us working together, and then also doing some stuff on their side on their own. Was they have and I didn't demonstrate it, unfortunately, didn't have time, but they have a great insights panel. So they wanted a lot of internal information that would typically be internal to the platform about how things are going that they can eventually show into the user. So things like, when it comes to speech, you just can't have enough information. So to be able to show a user, hey, when you said something and when you finished speaking until we said something was this long, and we can break it down into how much of that was speech recognition versus us versus something else. So I feel like that was an area where they really leveraged the open source.
Cool.
I think there's all sorts of one-off scenarios, sort of edge glue cases where you can address with open source, even if it's just funky carriers that, require something different in the signaling.
Exactly.
A lot of that. Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that's really cool. Do we have any questions from the audience? Jose, Sergio, Carol, do you have anything you'd like to ask Dave?
Well, I've been asking him a lot of questions lately by email, so I will keep doing that. Thank you, Dave, for the demos.
Thanks.
Exactly. Yeah. So, for those of you that were built on, Telestacks, there's a great alternative here. So I know there's been quite a few people that have been, keeping Dave working day and night, but it's great to see people doing some really cool stuff. I think the example you've got here with Cognigy is excellent. It's just so sweet. And the fact you just swap, showing basically Grafana and showing the tool and showing all the monitoring, it's sweet. It really does show the power of, as you said, standing on the shoulders of giants. It creates a very impressive product. So well done, Dave.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
let's go for it.
I was just going to say, I mean, I want to highlight that, some of the products that I use, I use a lot of open source products. Some of them are outstanding. I mean, of course, Grafana, but RTP Engine, just so impressive. Love that product.
Yes.
Love that. FreeSwitch, it does exactly what I need for sure. So yeah, the open source products that I use are I'm really proud of. API ban on all my systems for protecting spammers, which is still a big issue.
Yes, absolutely.
These are great products.
No, it really is. Cool, excellent. Well, we have no more questions. Again, thank you, Dave. That was an excellent presentation, excellent demo, and it's just, it's really heartening to see. Every time you give a demo of jambonz, there's just more and more and more cool stuff there. So well done, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.